the Pac-12 has returned to action this weekend, beginning a 7-game season, followed by a Pac-12 championship game happening on December 18th. With the Pac-12 and Big Ten playing shorter seasons, do these conferences have a shot at the playoff, and do they need to be perfect to get there? We'll start with the Big Ten. We'll start with the Pac-12. What do you guys think?
Starting with the Pac-12, I think the answer is no. I mean, here's the thing: the highest ranked team in the Pac-12 right now is at 12 in Oregon. Who are you taking to get to 4? Even if they're undefeated, I really believe that. Not to sound like John King on the magic wall here, but you've got Cincinnati and BYU ahead of Oregon, who are probably going to be favored in the rest of their games. Those two teams, I would sooner take those two to have a chance at the college football playoff this year than somebody out of the Pac-12. Because you look at the college football playoff this year, you've got a team from the ACC is going to make it. I think it's going to be Clemson, could be Notre Dame. You've got, the Big 12 is probably out of it. Somebody from the SEC is probably going to make it at least one, if not two. And then what else do you have? The thing is, I just don't see the Pac-12 as being good enough here. I'm sorry. You could say whatever you want. They have a shortened schedule. They've had 2 games postponed this weekend, but we'll see if those get made up. But even if you do play the whole schedule, it's only a handful of games. They're right over the minimum to get into the college football playoff. But I don't think it's going to come down to that. I just don't honestly believe that any team in the Pac-12 is good enough to be considered one of the 4 best in college football. And that's whether it's 6 games or 12 games or 24 games. It doesn't matter. I just don't think any of those teams in the Pac-12 are good enough right now.
Yeah, here's the problem with Oregon. The only other team ranked in the Pac-12 is USC, and they're at 20. So when you think about teams like Washington, Stanford, UCLA, they're not very good. And this is where not having a non-conference portion of your schedule is going to kill Oregon. Because even if they play all 7 games, they win the Pac-12 championship game, and they go 8-0. I don't think that resume, if you stack that up with a BYU or a Cincinnati or even a team that has 1 loss, let's say a Clemson, we were talking about Clemson, should they lose, if they were to potentially lose to Notre Dame, I don't think you're going to put an undefeated Oregon against the likes of those teams from the ACC, like a Clemson, or from the SEC, as a matter of fact. So again, I just think for Oregon, it's going to be tough sledding. They're going to need a lot of teams ahead of them to lose, and they're going to need other conferences to really just beat up on each other, Sam, because without that and no good non-conference games that they can hang their hats on, aside from their conference game with USC, and we don't know if USC even stays ranked if they were to lose or stumble up to that point. So again, for Oregon, it's going to be tough sledding, but I'm with Jimmy. I just don't see how the Pac-12 gets a representative in the college football playoff this season.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said, Andrew. Oregon's strength of schedule is just not great, and definitely playing only in the conference definitely hurts their chances. I think it's asking a lot out of Oregon. First of all, they have to go undefeated, which is not easy. I don't care, how easy your schedule may be. Winning every game and being perfect, certainly not easy. They have to win the Pac-12 championship. They also have to look really good doing so. I think if the committee's ever going to give them a nod at that 4 spot, they have to pass the eye test that they call it. They have to look very dominant against such an easy schedule. I think that's a whole lot to ask out of this team. But I do want to bring up a little bit of a counterpoint here. And you mentioned the Big 12 here. And I think them being down, kind of having a down year, Oklahoma State lost. It looks like no team in the Big 12 is going to represent that conference. I think that does help the Pac-12. A lot kind of has to happen in order for a 4 spot to be open for a team like Oregon. Maybe Notre Dame has to be out of the question. Maybe Georgia has to be out of the question, limiting the teams in the SEC and ACC to 1 representative. And then you add in maybe an Ohio State. It could open the door potentially for a Pac-12 team. I'm not going to say that the chances are completely out the window. I think there's a slight chance just based off the fact that it's unpredictable and there's a long way to go in the season. Obviously, Pac-12 just starting this week. It's a long way to go. I don't like the odds. I wouldn't bet on them, but I think there is maybe a slight chance that a team like Oregon could maybe sneak into a 4 spot there, but who knows?
Yeah, and it's tough. There's not a lot of paths through this thing for the Pac-12. Let's just be honest. I mean, there aren't a lot of good teams. The ones that are good have to go undefeated. It's not easy. It's going to be very hard. And, you look at other conferences, they have more options, at least, of teams. And you brought up the Big Ten. So let's get into the Big Ten. Their easiest path to the playoff is just Ohio State running the table. If it's not Ohio State, somebody else, but I don't know who else it's going to be. Indiana's undefeated right now. They're good, but they're not at that level. Michigan obviously is gone. So there's nobody else in that conference. Wisconsin lost a couple of games to COVID, so we don't know to the extent that they're going to be able to make that up. So I guess they're probably out of the equation at this point too. I think Ohio State. I actually picked Ohio State before the season to win it all, and I am sticking with that. Justin Fields is probably the Heisman frontrunner right now, with Trevor Lawrence being out. So you got to take Ohio State. If you're going to take anybody out of the Big Ten, you got to go with the Buckeyes. And that gives the Big Ten not only the best chance of getting to the playoff, but the best chance of winning a championship. So I think the Big Ten will get somebody on the virtue of Ohio State being so good this season. And I think they're going to run the table, and they're going to be the representative for the Big Ten in the playoff.
Yeah, people can't see right now if you're listening on the radio, but our producer Alex Walls is wearing a beautiful zip-up sweater right there from Oregon, and he wasn't too pleased with what we're saying, but I think he knows that we're half right. I mean, that the Pac-12 just isn't strong enough. But again, if they can get teams in other conferences to keep losing, like the Big 12, we could see that in the SEC and the Big 10 where teams are getting upset, then maybe that does open the door. But if you're the Pac-12, you are just hoping that a team like USC doesn't slip up against Arizona State. And you're hoping teams like a Washington or Stanford can win a few games and just get into the top 25, because the more ranked teams you can have in the top 25, the better that resume for Oregon will look if they do indeed run the table, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State definitely has a lot more credit, and I think the Big Ten's a stronger conference as a whole compared to the Pac-12, so that plays into something for the committee too. I mean, Ohio State has been pretty dominant so far, and they've looked very good. So if they run the table and they win out, certainly they'll make it 100%. Even if they lose a game here in the regular season, I think winning the Big Ten championship might still set them up to probably sneak in as like a 4 seed or something like that. I think even a 1-loss Ohio State, I would see the committee valuing that more than an undefeated Oregon team. And I don't know. I don't see Ohio State losing. I don't see them losing. I think they're going to run the table, but I think the committee definitely values the Big Ten in that conference a lot more than they do the Pac-12, and we'll see how things play out. Not so sure. We will see.